So I'd been to America, I'd won some awards, I'd come home, and I realized in America when I was there that to make a full-length film wasn't an easy task, and being an Aussie and not having enough connections as yet, I knew deep in my heart that I had to come home and shoot an independent film with the connections I already had and had established, and with the people around me that knew my work, that I knew that would be the easiest thing to do and also financially viable. So I set about making my first independent feature film called Tomboys. Tomboys is a one-room claustrophobic nightmare where 5 girls kidnap a serial rapist to seek revenge. The movie was released through Shock Entertainment again in Australia, and went on to get picked up overseas in America and Canada by Navarre. It was accepted into the Melbourne Underground Film Festival, which was great because that also gave me some clout and gave me a chance to network with the festival director there, Richard Wollstonecroft, and also introduced me to another eclectic filmmaker named Bill Masoulis, who invited me to become part of the Melbourne Independent Filmmakers Master List, which I didn't know exist. So, you know, the network was expanding, and the film was doing things for me that the shorts hadn't as much, I suppose, because it's a full-length piece and people want you to prove your worth and see whether you can do a 90-minute piece. Obviously, it's a hard task for any filmmaker. So here was an opportunity to show my voice, and with horror films in general, it's one of those things where, you know, there's so many of them, and, you know, trying to reinvent the wheel is a hard task as it is. So I thought, what can I do low budget that hasn't been done in a horror movie before? I hadn't seen a penis being severed in a very long time in horror, or done in a particular way, so I decided that would be my big calling card. That would be my shock factor for this movie that might create some controversy and get people talking, which is exactly what it did. So it was, again, you know, a lesson that especially with independent stuff, if you're not doing something original or trying to shock your audience or get them talking, then how are they going to know the movie even exists? So that was my hook. Having spent a lot of time on Tomboys, being low budget, and post-production in sound was quite epic. It probably took a year. We built a sound studio from scratch and did a 5.1 mix. It was a very, very long job. So also dealing with those themes of rape, revenge, and grindhouse and horror, etc., I really felt very claustrophobic. So my next piece that I wanted to do had to be outdoors. So I had a phone call from a distributor from a company called Dreamscape, and I got chatting, and he said to me, you know, what's the scariest story you've ever been told? And I said, well, the scariest story I've ever heard was actually from a school teacher, a substitute school teacher that I only met for one day, about a friend of his who had killed himself after hearing a scratching sound in his walls after he'd been to a seance to try and contact someone deceased in his family, but he didn't know what the seance was. It was friends of his that invited him to it. So I thought that was a really frightening tale to me. So Dreamscape financed the shoot, so I went out and was certain that I was going to make this movie outdoors and change my experience from indoors now to an outdoor experience with a lot of exteriors, blah blah blah. And it also gave me a chance to do my first time shooting underwater, where we actually built all of our own underwater housing and experimented with that, and so I had a lot of sequences underwater, which was a great experience. You know, having already done green screen, prosthetics, and aerial, I thought, okay, well, let's set another challenge now. Let's try underwater. So that was great. I didn't know whether the film was going to be distributed or not. I just knew that this was my next film as a creative artist, and that's what I needed to do. One thing I've always tried to do, and one thing I've always stuck to, is that no matter which production I'm working on, I must finish it. So even if the movie's not as good as the last, or maybe it's not going to get picked up, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, who knows. It's important as a creative artist, as an individual, to finish the works that you're currently on. And I'd noticed with a lot of friends and a lot of filmmakers I've met in the past that had not finished their pilot, or not finished their short film, or not finished their feature, that they became stifled somehow in their work and they weren't able to progress. So again, it's thinking about yourself and your own journey, and the journey of others, obviously, because film is a collaborative process, but finishing what you've started. So we made Seance. I didn't feel that it was as good as my other movies, but I'm certain that in life, as a filmmaker, some of your work will be good, some will be bad, some will be excellent, some will be average. That's just life. You know, you can never have a masterpiece every single time you attack a project, and because that's not what life is about. Life is about the ups and downs and grabbing the moments when you can. I think Coppola actually said that, who's one of my favourite directors, said that with his filmmaking, it wasn't about the movies he'd lost or the opportunities he'd lost, it was about the moments that he'd actually grabbed. So, you know, we try and grab as many as we can along the creative process and the journey. The next film I embarked on to make is a project with the title of Black Mass. Black Mass is a script that I had been working on for many, many years, and was first inspired to write it after reading the classic screenwriting novel by Sid Field. And Sid Field goes into the keys to make a good movie is about your characters, you know, having strong character backgrounds, and, you know, writing epic stories about the characters before you've even, you know, written the screenplay itself. So I took on board a lot of his teachings, and I started writing Black Mass, and it went on for years. The theme of Black Mass, though, involves the occult, and one thing I had noticed with a lot of occult genre films was that they either crashed or they didn't happen. And I never really understood why that was until I attempted to make one myself. Ultimately, I think that when you're living with a subject, whatever that subject may be, for perhaps a year or 2 or 3 years of your life when you're making a film, if it's a dark subject, like the occult for example, it can have some consequences. I definitely was subject to that. Here is a movie where for the first time I was able to generate Hollywood stars. I had three actors locked in before I even went into pre-production, based on how good the screenplay was that they loved. Then what happened was I had an investor come on board who said he'd finance the film, and I had Alliance Motion Pictures backing me as well. Now, at this stage of the game, I've got William Katt, who was the greatest American hero in the TV show back in the 80s. I've got Corey Feldman, I've got Corey Haim. I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be an 80s horror. It's like a cocktail of 80s horror. So then I went out and sought Punky Brewster. So I was looking for Salil Moon Fry to play the lead female, and I'd talked to her agent. I'd even talked to another agent in the UK and had Julian Sands interested in the project. So we were all these 80s horror stars all coming together to make this occult masterpiece. At the time, I auditioned the crew and ended up having majority of the crew that were attached had worked on Ghost Rider. So the production was becoming quite big, and then a horrible tragedy happened. Corey Haim died. Ironically, he died on my mother's birthday, so it was a very sad day, and left me with a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I thought this project is probably doomed, and I had my heart set on him playing the role. I couldn't think of anyone else to play this particular part. And then the primary investor became ill. So all of a sudden, you know, here comes my big Hollywood horror film, and I've crashed, and it's due to elements that are out of my control. And I sunk into quite a deep depression and didn't shoot any film for a while after that process, and unfortunately wasn't able to drum up other investors. I did create quite a buzz within the Hollywood street press, and the rumour mill was going berserk, and then the Corey seemed to be back in the limelight for a short period of time, but then couldn't get another investor on board. So I thought, okay, you know, enough is enough. We'll shelve this and we'll take it as a loss, and we'll move on and see what happens next.